Landmarks of Africa with Chanika and Charlie. Okavango Delta, Botswana. A Smart Kids Club publication. Contents at a glance. What is a delta? Hi, says Chanika. What do you think of when you hear the word delta? Charlie says, I think of the Mississippi River Delta. It's where the river comes to an end and goes into an ocean or sea. And there's a big buildup of sediment that comes from the river. That's right, says Chanika. And the most important word in your description is river. River? Asks Charlie. Yes, replies Chanika. Most deltas involve a river spreading out as it flows into an ocean, sea, lake, or reservoir. But our delta, the Okavango Delta, is unique. It starts on land and ends on land. Pretty surprising. And it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Where is the Okavango Delta located? Where is the Okavango Delta located? Asks Charlie. Chanika answers. The Okavango Delta is located in Botswana. Charlie asks, Where's Botswana? Chanika says it's one country north of South Africa, the southernmost country on the continent of Africa. It is in the central part of the Kalahari Desert, which is more like sandy grassland than a true desert, like the Sahara Desert. Charlie says, So it sounds more like a swamp than a delta or desert. You're almost right, says Chanika. It's part delta, part swamp, and the Okavango River. What makes the Okavango Delta so unique? Like we said before, there is a river involved, says Chanika. The Okavango River starts out and becomes a delta. But the delta is not a body of water like an ocean. It's called an inland delta. Charlie says, But that doesn't make sense. If there's a river and a delta, but no ocean, where does the water go? Chanika says, Good question. The water of the Okavango Delta evaporates. Just like if you put a glass of water on the table, the water will eventually disappear. It evaporates. And there's more. A new word. Endorheic. What are some of the characteristics found in the delta? Charlie says, I've never heard of that. Chanika says, It is a drainage basin that retains its water and does not empty into any other body of water. Instead, it drains its water through evaporation. Charlie says, And there is an endorheic lake or basin in the Okavango Delta? Yes, replies Chanika. It's a very complicated water system that starts out with the Okavango River and ends up on land, not in an ocean or sea, she adds. Some floodwaters in the Okavango Delta drain into Lake Ngami, but most go into the endorheic basin in the Kalahari Desert. What is the climate of the Okavango Delta? Charlie says, It sounds like it's a very wet place, but we also talked about the delta being like a sandy savanna. What is the climate like in a place like this? Good point, says Chanika. It's a very green place, but that's not because it has a wet climate. It's more like an oasis in a dry desert. There is rain, but it's only from December to March and comes in heavy afternoon thunderstorms. The temperatures in February can reach 104 degrees Fahrenheit, while in June to August, the cold season, temperatures can fall to just above freezing. Are there plants in the delta? Charlie asks, Are there many plants in the Okavango Delta? Chanika responds, yes, many plants, and many kinds of plants. There are many papyrus plants. Charlie says, that's what the ancient Egyptians used to write on. Chanika says, exactly. There are also reed rafts. One of the interesting things about the delta is that the Okavango River brings almost no mud. So there is mostly sand under the water and the small islands. Eventually, the floor of the delta will rise and new islands will be formed. What kinds of animals live in the delta? Now the best part, Charlie says. What kind of animals live in the delta? I've seen photos of elephants, hippopotamus, lions, and leopards. What other kinds of animals live in the delta? Chanika has some more animals that live in the delta. Both black and white rhinoceros, giraffes, wild beast, zebras, impala, eland, antelope, cheetahs, hyena, aardvark, warthog, baboon, and the Nile crocodile. There are also many birds, over 400 bird species. There are also 71 kinds of fish, including the catfish and tigerfish. Do people live in the Okavango Delta area? Chanika talks about the inhabitants of the delta. There are 5 ethnic groups in the delta. Each group has its own ethnic identity and language. Charlie asks, do they all live in the delta area all year round? Some do and some don't, answers Chanika. They can live permanently in the delta area, or some groups come and go from the delta depending on the weather and the amount of food available to them. The ethnic groups living in the Okavango Delta. How many groups live in the delta? Asks Charlie. Chanika tells him that there are 5 ethnic groups in the delta. 2 of the ethnic groups are Bushmen who fish, hunt, and collect wild plants. Are there any more? Wonders Charlie. Yes, answers Chanika. 3 are a little different from the first 2 because they live along the Okavango River in Angola, as well as the Caprivi Strip of Namibia, so the Okavango Delta extends outside of the main country of Botswana. The groups live mostly in Botswana and spill out a little into Angola and Namibia. What are some of the threats to the Okavango Delta? The country of Namibia is west of Botswana, where most of the Okavango Delta lies. The government of Namibia is thinking about building a hydropower station. What would happen if they do this? Asks Charlie. Chanika answers. This power station would regulate the flow of the Okavango Delta. Environmentalists are upset because the hydropower station would destroy most of the wonderful plants and animals living in the delta. The other threats are humans expanding the areas where they live. This takes areas of the delta away from the wildlife. The Kalahari Basin. Charlie says, earlier in this book, we learned a little about the Kalahari Basin. How is it related to the Okavango Delta? Chanika responds, it's because most of the area called the Kalahari is covered with red sand and has no permanent surface water, like a river. Charlie says, the Okavango River comes to the rescue. Right, responds Chanika. The Okavango River is the only permanent river in the Kalahari Basin. The river gives some of its water to form the marshes that are full of wildlife. Interesting facts. In 2013, the Okavango Delta was voted as one of the 7 natural wonders of Africa. In 2014, the Okavango Delta became the 1,000th place to be designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Okavango Delta is one of the best places in the world to see plant and animal wildlife. One of the ways that the locals get around in the delta is by using a mokoro, which is a kind of canoe in which the traveler stands and uses a long pole to push the mokoro through the delta waters. The delta has more than 150,000 islands, some small and some quite large. There are 530 bird species living in the delta. Between March and August, the delta grows 3 times its regular size. There are about 260,000 mammals that gather around the delta during the dry season. Some of the many kinds of mammals living in the delta include antelope, buffaloes, crocodiles, elephants, giraffes, hippos, hyenas, leopards, and lions. There are 2 kinds of fish-eating owls in the delta that are endangered: the Blackiston fish owl and Pell's fishing owl. Some of the endangered animals are white rhinos, only 35, and black rhinos, only 5.